Django has a built-in user object as we've already seen, but that user object isn't that useful. In my opinion, the best thing to do in almost every situation is to build a custom user model. That way you can get it to fit the exact needs of your particular project. One of the biggest issues I have with the built-in user model is that it uses the username as the login parameter. I think that the email is much more practical. Unfortunately, the Django newbies out there, which I'm assuming most of you are, creating a custom user model isn't outlined very well in the Django docs. So follow along very carefully because I think it's very easy to get mixed up here. And if you're curious, I'm looking at the documentation where it shows you how to create a custom user model. You can follow along with this if you want to, but I'm going to be showing you everything you need to know in this video. So the first thing I want to do is I want to actually go into our project directory and I want to delete this database. I want to delete the database because I want to start with a completely kind of clean slate, because right now we have users registered, we have stuff in the database that isn't going to be there later on. So just delete the database, and we're also going to delete the migration. So I'm highlighting all of these migrations, including the initial one. I'm going to right click here and go to delete file. So the only thing left, make sure you still have the migrations folder, you still have the init.py file inside the migrations, but all of the actual migrations themselves have been deleted. So basically now we have a completely kind of clean slate, and I can activate my virtual environment, make sure that's activated, and then I want to run the server just to regenerate that database file. So there's that SQLite database file being regenerated. Now I can stop the server and we can work on what we were going to start building in this video, which is a custom user model. So how do we go about building a custom user model? Well, we need to actually create a new app first of all. And this is going to be the account app. So I'm going to go Python manage.py, start app account. And the account app is going to contain a model for our custom users. It's actually going to be called account, but it's technically a custom user. So I'm creating that app. And now since I've created a new app, I should see that over here, which there it is right there. And as you know, as we've talked about before, whenever you create a new app in Django, you need to go into the settings file and you need to add that app right here. If you don't do that, it won't work properly and you'll get errors on your server. So once I've added that, I'm pressing Control S to save that. And now I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to close this. I'm going to go into account, go into models, and we're going to build our new custom user model. Before I start building, I'm going to get a couple imports that we're going to be using. So from django.contrib.auth.models, I want to import two classes, AbstractBaseUser and BaseUser Manager. Those are two imports that we're going to need for this video. I just wanted to add them ahead of time. That way I don't have to just kind of add them. I don't want to break the flow as I'm writing out these classes. If you're curious what AbstractBaseUser is and BaseUser Manager, once again, check out the documentation. It talks about that. There's this AbstractUser class, and then if you scroll down more, there should be AbstractBaseUser. But yeah, if you want more information on these, you should read this. But basically, it's just these are classes that you can use to extend the kind of generic Django user model and create a custom user model. So check out the docs if you want to learn more, but I'm going to show you everything you need to know in this video. All right, so let's create a new class. This class is going to be called account, and it's going to extend the AbstractBaseUser class. I think in Python, I think in Django and Python, you call them classes. I'm not exactly sure because I'm an Android guy, but I'm going to call them classes. I think it sounds right, so whatever. So the first field is I want to use an email. I want to have an email parameter, and this is what we're going to be using to log in. So I'm going to do models.email field. I'm going to go verbose name and set the verbose name equal to email. I also need a max length parameter, so max length equals 60 characters, and I want, of course, it to be unique, since this is going to be the unique identifier for anybody who creates an account. They're going to be able to log in using their email instead of using their username, which is the sort of generic, the base Django functionality. So now I'm going to create a username field, because I still actually want a username field. I just don't want people to be able to log in with their username. So max length equals, let's just do 30 characters. And of course, this one will also be unique, so people can't have the same username. Now, The fields that I'm going to add now are actually required for the AbstractBaseUser class. And like I said, you can check out the documentations if you want, but just know that if you go to create your own, whoops, I kind of lost my, oh, my keyboard died there. There we go. If you go to create your own custom user model, you will need to add these fields. So just keep that in mind. Actually, you know what? I'm going to actually just copy this from the source code because there's no point in me typing this out. So I'm going to the GitHub page for this project, going to the Coding with Mitch blog course. I'm going to go to, let's see, this branch is creating a custom user model. Going to source, going to account, going into models, and you could technically copy this entire file if you wanted to, but I recommend following along with me. It's better to learn. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these fields right here, go back to the project, and I'm going to paste those in. Also, just as kind of a side note for those of you who aren't familiar with Python, notice that all of the spacing, so the white space is all the same here. If I actually used a space here instead of a tab, you'd see these little white dots, and this would actually cause an error. And sometimes they can give kind of cryptic errors. So I just wanted to let you know that if you ever get kind of a weird error, make sure to highlight everything and make sure that the spacing is correct. So what you want to do is just do, you want to tab it in so that all the spacing matches. So anyway, let's take a look at these fields. So we have date joined, last login, is admin, is active, is staff, and is super user. So all of these fields are required if you're going to create a custom user model. These ones are actually required, and then of course I could add any more if I wanted to. Like I could add, first name. You do a character field. I could add, date of birth, anything. But the point that I want to make here is that these are required. So if you go to build a custom user model, you must use these fields. Also pay attention to the default values that I gave to these booleans. So is admin, the default value is false. Is active set to true, so every user is just active by default. Is staff and is super user, of course, are set to false because you don't want to give extra permissions to anybody who isn't supposed to have them. Next comes another very important kind of property to, or I guess thing that you need to know when you're creating a custom user model. You need to set the username field to whatever you want the user to be able to log in with. Now, this is something that actually bothers me because it's really not intuitive with Django, but basically what it's saying here is whatever you want to be able to log in, use this. So I think this is a stupid name. It should be like login field or something like that, but it's username field. It's a keyword. So you have to set username field equal to whatever you want them to log in with. If it was username, you would put username, but in this app, obviously, like I said, we want to log in with the email. So I'm setting email. Next, I want to set anything that is required. So any fields that are required when they're actually registering. So you can do a list here or a Django dictionary. The only field that I want them to be able, that I'm requiring, other than this, of course, is the username field. So when they register, I want them to, they must have a username and they must have an email and they must be unique. If I was to create another field like first name, just as an example, I would do models.character field, do like max length equals, I don't know, 30. If I had this first name field and I wanted them to include a first name when they register, I would do first name like that. Then it would not allow them to register unless they entered their first name. But of course, in this, I don't really care. I don't want a first name. I'll just comment that out just in case you want to look for a reference. Okay, now we have to kind of just do some of the Python stuff. We need a string field. So this is like a toString method, remember, in Android. Basically what this means is whenever I print an account object to a template, what do I want to display? Well, I want to display the email. You can choose anything, of course. You could choose the username if you wanted to, just replace that with username. Or you could even concatenate the two. You could do like, comma self.username. And then that would print out the email, comma, the username. Whatever you want, I'm just going to use the email. So next, now we need to define a couple of functions. These functions are required if you want to build a custom user. So you need to use these no matter what. Basically, there's one that gets the permissions for this particular user, and don't worry about this. If you're confused, just literally copy this, because it's really not going to affect you unless you have a website that is quite high end, where different users have different permissions. You have staff, you have admin, you have users, all that kind of stuff. So just kind of copy this out and move on, I think is the advice that I would give you. The next one is has module permissions, self, app, label, and I just want to return true. So I'm just returning true for this. No matter what, it will always have module permissions. Does the user have permission? They have permission if they're admin. So they can basically do stuff if they're admin is what I'm saying. So that's why here the admin parameter is set to default equal to false, so that if a user is admin, they're going to be able to change things in the database. So that should be the only sort of functions that we need to create a custom user model. Now, the next step is creating something called a custom user manager. And if you look at the Django documentation, as I said, you can read through here, and it will, if you scroll down, you'll find somewhere where it says, we recommend writing a manager for a custom user model. So that's what I'm going to show you to do. Once again, I'm going to show you how to do everything. So don't worry about it. If you don't want to read the docs, I'm going to show you everything you need to. So I'm going to create another new class and it's going to be called My Account Manager. It's going to extend that base user manager that I imported up top there. And let's see, it says, if you do read the docs, I just want to kind of mention, it says that if you create a custom manager, you need to override these two methods, create user and create super user. So basically what I'm doing is I'm defining what I want to happen when a new user is created and when a new super user is created. So define create user is the name of this one. Self, it takes email, it requires a username, and it needs a password. So I'm passing email and username here because those are the two required fields to create a user. I must have an email since I'm logging in with an email, and username is a required field. If you had any other required fields, like if this was here and you had your first name and you were requiring that, you would also need to add a first name parameter to here, just kind of as a FYI in case you want to require more information when you register users. So there's our fields that are required to create a user. So now what are we going to do with this? Well, first of all, if not email, then I want to raise an error. So I want to raise something called a value error. Users must have an email address. So just raising an error if for some reason the user did not enter their email. If not username, then I want to do something similar and just say they must have a username. Users must have a username. All right, so what if they actually do have a username, they do have an email, then what? Well, then I want to create that user. So I want to go user.model, and inside model, I want to pass the parameters that they require. So email equals self.normalize email. And don't be confused by that. Normalize email, all that does is it will convert all of the characters in the email to lowercase. So you're normalizing it for when it gets inserted into the database. And then, of course, you're just adding that username. Normalize email usually isn't available. You can't just use it anywhere. It's available inside of the base user manager class. So that's why I'm able to access it here. If you were in a view, you can't just call normalize email. It's because it's inside this base user manager class that I can use it. So now I want to do user.setPassword. Same thing with setPassword, by the way. It's a method that can be used on a user object. I want to set it to the password, and then user.save using equals self.db _ db, and then return user. And that is going to be our create user method. I'm kind of losing my voice here. What's going on? Again, I just want to say, don't worry about the notation here. Just copy kind of the flow of what I'm using. If you had another extra required field, like I said, you'd add it here, you'd check for it, and then you'd add it to this model method. You'd still set the password and still save the same way. So everything else would work the exact same way. Next, I want to create a super user. So create super user. This is going to be very similar. We need self, email, username, and password. We need to do kind of the very similar process right here. So user equals all of this stuff, except I do want to add a password field here. Now we need to set some more properties. So is admin, is active, is staff, is super user. All of these defaults will get used when they create a user, but we don't want those defaults to be used when creating a super user, because we want them to be an admin, obviously. So is admin equals to true. I'll need a bunch of these. So all 4 of these, actually I don't need 4, I just need 3, but is staff equal to true, and is super user equal to true. So all of those properties where the defaults are set down here, we're changing them because it's a super user. Obviously, we want them to be able to do anything. So user.save, once again, using equals self.db, and then I want to return the user. And that's it. So we have our custom user manager, we have our custom user object, and now I want to tell this account object where the manager is. So how to use the manager. You do that by setting an objects parameter. So objects equals my account manager, and just reference the account manager that we built up here. So if I zoom out, there is our model. So we have our account, our custom user model, and we have our custom account manager, which is the custom user manager. So the last step in this whole process is we need to go into my site, go into settings, and I need to set a property. This property is called the auth user model, and then I want to set that to the model that I just created. So that'll be account, which is the app. I'm referencing the account app, and I'm referencing the account model. So I'm referencing this right here. What this does is it overrides the default behavior that's built in with Django for a default user object. And I'm saying instead, I'm authenticating users using this custom one that I just built. So I need to tell Django where my custom user model is basically. Now we're ready to go to our server. So Python manage.py. I already created a new database, so I need to do make migrations to migrate our new model. There's the migrations, Python manage.py migrate to commit all those changes. Now Python manage.py and run server. And now let's go to our server and let's take a look. So if I go to the admin and, I need to create a super user actually. So cancel that, Python manage.py, create super user. So now this is going to use that create super user method that we just built. So that's going to run this method right here. So I need to enter the email, mitch@tabian.ca. Username will be Mitch. My password is just password. Yes, override that. And now let's run the server. Go to the admin again. And I'm going to log in with my password of password. Looks like that didn't work. Just spent a couple minutes debugging. I found a couple mistakes. So inside of the model here, this should be using instead of user for the save method. That one's using, that's good. And also, what else did I need to change? This needs to be create user instead of model. So inside create super user, we call self.createUser. Then inside create user, we call self.model. Now I'm going to press Control S to save that. And we need to kind of restart this whole process. So I'm going to make sure the server's not running. I'm going to delete the SQLite database. I'm going to also delete the migrations inside of account. So it looks like there's just that one. I'm deleting it. That should be good. So now I'm going to go back to our server, Python manage.py, make migrations, Python manage.py migrate. Now I want to create that super user. So Python manage.py create super user. It'll be mitch@tabian.ca. My username is Mitch. My password is password. Yes, there we go. Now Python manage.py run server. And now let's see if it all works. So going to the admin, type my password of password. There I am logged in. And I didn't add the account to the admin. So the question stuff should actually be removed also. So going back to Sublime Text and going into the admin here, I want to call from account.models import account, and then admin.site.register and register the account. And I'm going to save that. I don't need to restart the server. With admin stuff, it kind of it looks like there's a problem. Let's check out the console. Could not import from account.models import. This needs a capital. Import account. There we go. So the server doesn't need to be restarted. Admin stuff doesn't need a server restart. Go into accounts, and there should be that one super user right there, which is mitch@tabian.ca. Now I want to test this. I'm going to create another user. Looks like obviously we have some work to do here. So I'm going to give this user a password of password 1234. This will be jessica@gmail.com. Her username will be Jess. Is she an admin? No. Is she active? Yes. Staff? No. Super user? No. Let's click Save and Continue. That user was created. If I go to Accounts, there's that secondary user that's now created. So there's obviously a couple of things wrong with this picture. Number one is I shouldn't be able to see what the password is, and I shouldn't be able to change the password from the admin. This is technically a hash. Or usually what you can do is you can hash these passwords so that they don't actually show in the admin. It just shows an encrypted version of it. So we still need to fix that. In the account screen, I want to see more attributes listed. So if I go to the account screen, all that I can see is the email. It would be nice to show the email, the username, the date that they joined, some of the other fields that we have in the model, which are available here. But currently there's just that single one. So we're going to work on editing that too. And number 3 is I also can't search users. There's no way to search users here. So if I had like 1,000 users, 10,000 users, 100,000 users, it'd be almost impossible for me to find them. And that's obviously a problem because sometimes you gotta change things manually inside of an account. Like if a user has a membership, they want to change their membership and there's a problem, whatever it is, you need to be able to find these users manually. So in the next video, we're gonna work on all the things that I just mentioned. Basically, that means just working on the admin console, hiding these passwords, getting some more details in these rows, and also being able to search users.